So what I'd like to do today is, during my piece of the talk, is give a quick kind of an introduction into the evolution of cross-border commerce, how physical shipments are crossing more country borders with greater frequency and greater volumes today, that is resulting in regulations by all these different governments, countries all over the world, who want to regulate the import and the export of all of these physical packages, and how those regulations could possibly impact your customer experience. If you are a seller of physical products, if you are a platform, a marketplace platform that enables companies to buy and sell products online, all of these situations, all of these scenarios, the regulations that are being implemented in the form of tax requirements could impact the ultimate customer experience, and then give an intro into how Avalara is solving for that scenario. So with that, I am, like I said, the product manager for our landed cost calculator. I come with a really big retail background. I've managed international trade operations and compliance for some of the largest companies here in the United States and multinationals around the world. So it's very exciting for me to be able to take all of the things that I've done and all of the things that I've learned and be able to apply them for a small or a mid-size or a company of any size, actually, to be able to automate their cross-border operations. So over the last several years, it's obviously become easier for buyers and sellers all over the world to be able to connect with each other. On one hand, trade has become easier. On the other, it's also become more complicated. And here's what I mean by that. There's been so many amazing advancements in industrial operations and manufacturing, shipping, transportation. All of this digital disruption and technology advancement has simplified the buying and the selling process. We have mobile devices and marketplace platforms, all these different fulfillment options, and there always seems to be a faster, cheaper shipping method that makes it so simple for a company of any size to ship something to a customer in another country easier than it's ever been before. Then on the other hand, trade has become more complicated in that because of the increased volume, because it's so easy to do, more people are shipping more small packages of things all over the world, that there are more regulations being amended, being enacted, more taxes, tax rates are changing, tax requirements are changing at a more rapid pace than they ever have been before. So again, trade becoming much, much easier. It's easier to buy and sell across country borders. It's also becoming more complicated. In e-commerce, all of that digital disruption has created this big boom in e-commerce. I don't need to tell anybody that. That's obvious. We're all aware. But because of e-commerce, there's that increase in the volume of small package shipments that are moving from country to country across these borders. But these shipments used to fly under the radar. Governments never used to care about what was in the small boxes. They cared about what was in the big containers and the air cargo and all of those things, big retail. That's not the case anymore. So because of the increase in small package volume, we've got an increase in customs and tax regulation, and that is where there could be this risk. Right? This is where the risk to the customer expectation might insert itself. So governments have acknowledged this rise in these low-value package volumes, and they're responding. And all of this threatens to impact delivery targets, speed to market, and overall customer satisfaction. So I share this diagram, this visual, to make it kind of clear what happens between the time a seller makes a decision about selling something to customers in other countries and when the buyer actually receives it at their doorstep. Usually there's some really fancy animation with this slide, but you don't get that, unfortunately, today. So I'll kind of walk through it. This is the sequence of compliance events that are involved in moving something from one country to another country. And when I talk to customers and prospects, I refer to this as the delivery chain. Different than the supply chain. I'm not talking about the manufacturing process or any of those way upstream details. I'm talking about that last mile, so to speak. So consumers that shop online, they have delivery expectations. It's really easy for them to assume, oh, my shipment will come in 2 days or overnight or what have you. And that means that sellers and marketplace platforms have this very specific window of time, this very specific opportunity to reliably fulfill their customers' expectations. Each of the orange bubbles in this diagram is kind of a micro process, if you will. It represents a compliance risk area that can and probably eventually will impact the speed to market and the customer's satisfaction. All of these steps tend to be lumped in with what people call the quote-unquote shipping process. These are all shipping steps, right? These tend to go overlooked. They're invisible because for the most part, I've found people don't think about how stuff moves until stuff stops moving. After all, the customers, the people who are shopping online, they're not perceiving country borders on the internet. So it's really easy to understand and get how these steps are getting missed when shipments move from country to country. So the overall point is that the shipping is more than just popping something in a box and shipping it off and expecting it to pop out the other side with no issue. There was a recent study done that found that 1/3 of United States merchants who were selling online had actually suffered some sort of a cross-border shipment delay or a reject or a customs penalty because of a compliance-related oversight. Now, that study was only done in the U.S. It didn't take all international and multinational situations into consideration, but still 1/3 is pretty astounding. So this is because, so let me back up a sec. The key to mitigating this risk, this cross-border risk, there's a step called the tax and duty, the customs duty and tax calculation that should occur just prior to checkout. And if I had my little laser pointer like I usually do, I'd be circling it, but you can see it's the second orange bubble from the right on the top. This one little step. And the reason that this is the key, kind of almost the magic bullet, is because doing the duty and the tax calculation right here prior to the point of sale naturally forces merchants to address some really important details that they would normally ignore or they wouldn't be aware of that could manifest as problems later. For example, merchants can avoid delivery days caused by confusion over who pays the customs duty and the tax upon arrival. By calculating the customs duty and the tax prior to checkout, it requires that seller make the business decision. Just make the decision about who's going to be responsible for paying the duty and tax when that shipment arrives at its destination. Will it be them as the selling party, or will it be the customer as the buying party? That might seem really simple to most people, but often companies will just assume that the buying party will pay the tax, so their website won't say anything at all. It won't say buyer responsible for tax and customs duty. It leaves a lot of confusion. And the shipping companies don't necessarily know who's going to pay the duty and tax. So there's an opportunity there to calculate the duty and tax and then communicate it and advise who's going to pay for it, the buying party or selling party. Big opportunity there. Another example is being able to avoid possible penalties and delays because the items in the shipment didn't have the required compliance information, such as harmonized tariff codes that had already been assigned to each item. When shipments arrive and the paperwork doesn't include any of those compliance details, everything has to stop. The shipment stops. The shipping company usually has to scramble and go collect that information because they need those harmonized tariff codes in order to figure out what the appropriate customs duty rate should be. Then they can calculate the customs duty and the tax, and then they can request that the customer pay for it. All of this scrambling creates, additional delay to a shipment's delivery time. Everybody has to drop everything and go find all of these details. It creates a kind of a circus, actually. So when we at Avalara, when we looked at this tax and duty requirement, this calculation, we started referring to it as the landed cost. And the reason is the landed cost, it's a very common shipping term. The landed cost is a term that's used to explain the total cost of getting a physical product from the seller's facility in one country to the buyer's door in another. At the highest level, the landed cost includes the cost of the goods, which of course presumably includes all of the engineering and the sourcing and the manufacturing and all of those things, plus margin, right? It also includes the door-to-door shipping cost, and then all of the customs duty and import tax involved to deliver the goods to the customer in their destination country, at their door. So overall, the concept of calculating this landed cost is really simple, but it's deceivingly tricky. It's tricky because there are so many variables involved. For instance, different countries use different formulas to calculate their customs duty. And when I say different country, I'm referring to the destination country. Also, some countries exempt duty and tax unless the shipment value exceeds a certain amount. In the regulations, this is referred to as the de minimis amount. It means that any shipment less than, in the EU, I believe it's 150 euro. In Canada, any shipment greater than 20 Canadian dollars requires duty and tax. In the United States, any shipment greater than $800, that meaning any shipment less than 800 US dollars doesn't require duty and tax. Australia, it's $1,000. So it varies all over the world. But it's mostly difficult to determine the duty and tax calculation because of the rates involved. So the rates are different for every product in every country, and it comes down to those harmonized tariff codes. Now, I only have a small little bit of time to talk with you today. I have taught classes on how to assign harmonized tariff codes to products that have gone for months and months. So it's a huge, very complicated area, probably worth setting up another webinar for just to talk about them. But the assignment of harmonized tariff codes to all of the products that want to be bought and sold across borders is one of the trickiest areas that come into play when you're calculating your landed cost. So, that said, calculating the landed cost is so tricky. In fact, over half the merchants that are currently selling cross-border today don't do it. If it's so special, you might be thinking, hey, Amy, if it's such a magic bullet, why don't more merchants calculate it? Well, in my assessment is that there's four main reasons. One, there's fear on two different levels. One being that the selling party could be afraid that showing the customs duty and the import tax in the shopping cart might scare their customers, might cause them to abandon their carts. Then there's also the fear of uncertainty. There's this rising tide of protectionism and this anti-trade rhetoric going around in the world right now where some folks just don't understand if the duty rates are going to change or tax rates are going to change. There's all this uncertainty in the world. So the companies may not want to touch or have anything to do with calculating tax because of the fear of change. There's also the desire. Some customers I talk to or prospects I talk to, they just don't want to calculate it because they just don't want the risk. They don't want to be responsible or on the hook for the calculation because it is so difficult to do. Further, they may not have the resources, they may not have the personnel on staff or the right systems or the right knowledge, which is the other reason. Some companies they may not know that there's a tax obligation involved, or they may not know how to do the calculation, or realize that there's options out there, there's technologies and calculators that can help them. I like to flip the whole why don't companies do it to why should companies calculate their landed cost? Well, first of all, it's a huge market. Cross-border e-commerce is the fastest growing opportunity for retailers today. The world wants to shop across border. Customers in their home country want what's in another country. It's just human nature. And 78% of consumers are buying online, and a third of those are buying cross-border. So there's so much more potential. So the market is huge. There's also the opportunity to reduce delays, shipping delays, and increase the speed to market. Because if a seller doesn't calculate their cross-border tax, their customer experience is going to start taking hits. I already I hammered on it earlier, that governments are charged now with enforcing all of these evolving regulations on all of these packages that are crossing their borders. So to keep up, these governments are starting to invest in technologies and modernize so that they can improve their enforcement techniques, which can and will result in more customs delays and missed delivery targets. So again, sacrificing that customer experience. Further, doing the duty and tax calculation creates more predictability. It reduces and eliminates that element of surprise that end customers will have, like if they're surprised that there's an additional cost that they have to pay when their shipment arrives, when their order arrives at their border. That's not a good experience. So in order to minimize rejected shipments and customer frustrations, let's give them the landed cost, right? And finally, there are solutions to help now. There wasn't before. Barriers to entering the cross-border market are coming down thanks to technology. So if you sell anything, I don't have to tell you that the pace of change in retail is relentless. But what's not going to change, and I'm very passionate on this topic, is the desire for global products. So the fact is that ultimately, if you're selling globally, you will have to do something. You will have to do something to address the tax obligation issue eventually. So I want to give an example. This is a quick real-life story that explains this problem and explains how not doing a tax or customs duty calculation can kill the customer experience and make or break your cross-border selling strategy. So this is my friend and colleague, Will Rao. Will is from our Seattle office, but he relocated to our India office last year. And it took a while for Will and his family to adjust to life in India because he was used to some very familiar comforts that were difficult for him to find there. For example, he was used to having his organic granola bars and his almond butter, baby formula, certain vitamin supplements and things, but he couldn't just get them at the corner shop in Pune, India, where our office is. So, lucky for Will, he found this really great retail site. It was an online website that all they do is sell organic snacks, food products, home care products, different supplements, baby products, and all of these things. It was perfect, match made in heaven. This website has also invested in some really awesome tools. So they had a tool that allowed Will to select the country he wants his products shipped to. So he could select India, he could select the US, whatever. He could select the language. He could select the currency. So in India, he could ask for, I want all of my all of the language to be in English. I want to see the currency in US dollars, but I want my product shipped to India. So it was very easy for him to shop. So he found all the stuff he needed. He filled up his shopping cart with all of the products. It totaled approximately $212 US. And then at checkout, the company attached $14 US for the shipping. And then he noticed that they even said zero tax. So there was no tax. It had a line for tax, but nothing was calculated. It said zero. So Will didn't think anything of it. He's like, this is a great deal. For $226 US, I'm getting all of my snacks, and I'm getting all of my vitamins and my baby formula and shipping, and I'm going to get it in a week. Sounds like a pretty awesome deal. So as soon as Will clicked proceed to checkout and he gave his credit card and he did all that good stuff, the selling party, they received the order, they packaged up all the items, they shipped the stuff off to Will in India, and then Will got this little note. That little UPS info notice, we've all received those things, but this little notice 1 week later said, hey, Will, India Customs says you have to pay us another $290 US or we won't deliver your package. This isn't UPS's fault. This is India Customs. India is notorious for having really high customs duty and import tax rates, and they require that money gets paid before they will actually deliver the product to the customer. So let's recap this really quickly. If we do some quick math, we can see that the goods themselves cost about $212 plus the $14 in shipping for a total of $226 US. That is what Will paid at checkout. Then you have the $290 in customs duty and import tax for a total landed cost of $516 US. So needless to say, Will was super frustrated, not only that there was a delay in the shipment and the delivery because they had to figure all of this stuff out, but he also was frustrated that he didn't know he was going to be on the hook to pay this additional duty and tax. So he was so frustrated, in fact, he just rejected the shipment. He said, UPS, just send it back. Forget it. I don't want it. I'm angry. And there you go. All of this pain, all of this entire miserable experience could have been avoided had Will known that there was going to be a customs duty and a tax obligation at the time of checkout. So he could have backed out of the transaction, said, nope, this is more expensive than I want to pay. But now it's an even more expensive problem for the retailer because they have to pay for the transportation for their rejected shipment back to their facility. They have probably lost a customer forever, and they have to deal with processing that return within their own system. So for reasons like this, which is not uncommon, I do hear it all the time, I believe that not calculating this landed cost is the top mistake companies make when they go global because it impacts so many things. So all that to say that there are solutions now. There are solutions that can help. There are automated solutions that can help because in my past, there weren't. If I wanted to calculate the landed cost for any of the companies I worked for in my past, I did it using a whole bunch of spreadsheets. I'd have these huge spreadsheets that had all of the item numbers on it, and then it would have all of the different harmonized tariff codes for each of those products, for each of the different countries that I sell to, with all of their duty rates, et cetera, and so forth. You get the picture. And then in some cases, we had ERP systems, we had fancy global trade management systems, but in order to get the customs duty to calculate right, we had to modify some special fields. And even then, I had to go do my math in a spreadsheet and then go pop the results of my math into the system. So again, not very efficient. There are other instances where I would just rely on my third party, be it UPS or FedEx, DHL. All these great companies I worked with to ship my products, but I relied on them in some cases to do the math for me. The issue with that is they are not liable for any of the compliance elements. They're not responsible if the math is done wrong, if the wrong duty rate is applied. So all of these old ways worked at one point, but they don't have to work that way anymore. Now we have better ways. We have, when I say we, I mean the collective we, there are affordable APIs or application programming interfaces. There are plugins. There are all these cool tools that are super affordable that can plug right in to your existing system, your existing marketplace, your whatever it is that you're already doing. These calculators can plug right in, and you don't have to invest a ton of overhead or buy a whole new system. They're affordable. They will give you the confidence needed to move forward, to move past all of this uncertainty that's going on in the world with the pace of change of tax rates and things going crazy and nobody knowing what the right answers are. You don't have to worry about that anymore. These tools will do that for you. And these APIs, like I said before, they weren't an option until recently. So, and the final point on these is that some of these tools are even what I'm calling ship method neutral, meaning UPS and FedEx and DHL, they all have APIs that will do things like this. But what's to say you want to use multiple different shipping companies? You want to use FedEx when you ship to Canada and DHL when you ship within Europe, and maybe you want to use UPS for the United States. Does that mean you have to implement 3 APIs? I don't think so. I think that there are tools like ours where you can use one tool to do the calculation and then disseminate that information across all of your shipping providers. And the beautiful, magical thing is that Avalara can do that with our landed cost calculator. So an overview of the calculator we have in a picture, and then I believe Colin's going to give a demo here in a few moments, is that the landed cost calculator we've developed will take specific inputs, the ship to and the ship from country. You tell us the type of transaction, who's going to pay the tax, the customer or the merchant. You provide the tariff codes for the products that you're selling, and you also provide the dollar amounts. Most of these, the countries and the dollar amounts, are already being passed in the invoice details. That's not new. Once we collect all of those inputs, we do all of the math. We know all of the formulas for each of the countries. We can calculate the customs duty. We can calculate the import tax. And we also do a couple other really cool things. So our calculator looks at the countries and says, is this a country-to-country transaction? If yes, does the value of that transaction meet that dollar, that currency value threshold for that destination country? If yes, then it will calculate the customs duty, it will calculate the local tax, and it will configure the results of that calculation depending on which type of transaction it is, depending on whether the customer is going to be responsible for paying the duty and tax or whether the merchant will be responsible. We have messages for both. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to my colleague Colin Matthews, who's going to run through a demo that will explain how all of this comes together.
Thank you, Amy. I'm now going to do a short demonstration on how Avatax, which is our global tax engine, can help you calculate import VAT and duties on your cross-border sales. So we're going to look at a shipment from the US to a customer in Germany. So that's goods that are not in EU free circulation, and consider 2 typical delivery terms. That's DDP and DAP. So DDP is delivery duty paid, and essentially means that the seller is obliged by the agreement to deliver the goods to the chosen destination set by the customer, and is responsible for paying any import VAT and duties that might be applicable in delivering those goods to that location. And DAP is delivered at place, and means that the seller is responsible for delivering the goods to the chosen location set by the customer, but any import VAT and duties to get the goods there is payable by the customer. So this is the Avatax admin console. Now, just to clarify, the Avatax is our global tax engine. It's a system that integrates to any source system, whether that's through a connector to the 500 partner platforms that we work with, or through an API to automate the tax calculation for any transaction. So whether, for instance, we need to connect to a financial system, an e-commerce system, or payment gateway, or point of sale system, we will take the data for that transaction automatically, and then in, I believe, 0.4 of a second, return the correct treatment on that transaction. I'm here looking at the admin console, where I'll get an overview of my account, as well as a breakdown of my taxable status. So it's showing me here my taxable and exempt supplies. I have an exemption exposure, and at the bottom as well, I have a very useful help centre. So if, for instance, I need to learn about a particular feature in the application, then you can go to the knowledge base or user guides. Or if I so desired and I wanted to learn about sales tax and VAT, if that's something you really wanted to do, then you can go to our university and watch some training videos and read some materials in there around that as well. But today, I just want to focus on showing you how we do a cross-border transaction using the DAP or DDP delivery terms to show how we calculate any import VAT and duties that could be due. So I'm going to go to transactions, where I'm able to replicate a supply of goods or services, but just keep in mind that this is normally done automatically. So through our connectors or through an API, this process is automated. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'm doing it manually. So in my example, I want to ship goods from the US. I'm going to choose a location in the US and select a predetermined one for the sake of time. And I'm shipping those goods to my customer in Germany. I'm going to give it a document code. Got DDP as well. And I then need to tell the system what is the delivery term on this supply. So is it delivery due to paid? Is it delivered at place, or any other delivery term that may be applicable? So this first one, I'm going to say the delivery term is DDP. So I've now completed the header level of that invoice, such as the standard information that would appear at the top of an invoice, as well as the delivery term. I'm going to add a line to that invoice. Again, this is done automatically through the connectors or through an API. This is just one line on this invoice. We give it a quantity and an amount, and I'll give it a tax code. So the tax code is our Avalara tax code that we would map to your source system's SKU. So we know what's being supplied. We go through a process of mapping your SKUs to our tax codes as part of the implementation, and that tells us what's being supplied so we can apply the correct VAT or sales tax rules and understand the taxability around that transaction. I'm now going to add one more attribute, this time the HTS code. So that's the commodity code or HS code that you'll be familiar with, that identifies that product during the customs clearance. So the customs agent will punch this code into its system to understand what's being imported and apply the necessary duties that are applicable on that code. I'm going to add that transaction or add that line and just save that. If I now review that transaction, what AvaTax has done for me is it has calculated, firstly, any VAT that is due on that transaction. So this is output VAT, and the reason I'm charging output VAT is because I'm the importer of record under the DDP condition. So therefore my onward supply to my customer is domestic in the country of destination. So I've chosen Germany, where the rate is 19%, so it's applied 19% VAT. But it's also calculated for me any duties that are applicable on that supply, and what on that supply is a taxable basis for that calculation. So I'm not just calculating the VAT that's due as an output amount, I'm also calculating any duties that I have to pay to the customs officer. So they can be incorporated in my price to cover any additional costs on a DDP transaction. If instead the transaction was DAP, again, that is delivered at place, where the seller is responsible for paying any import VAT and duties. Then if I just select the same again, whoops, and I get the customer number. So it's the same as I've just done a moment ago. 1,000. I'll save that as well. You'll see that this time, instead of adding the duties as a line item on that transaction, because it's something that we're recharging to the customer effectively in our price, what we're doing instead is we're not charging any VAT, but we are telling the customer what they can expect to pay at checkout. So we're saying that this is what you pay to us at the bottom, so the price includes any taxes that are due on that supply. But in addition, as the importer of record, you will pay this amount. So the customer has full visibility of any taxes that are due on their purchase before the customs officer arrives at their door asking them to pay. This is a great improvement on your customer's experience. They're not buying your product and then being asked to pay some additional costs to collect their parcel. They're being told at checkout that this is the cost, but there are some additional charges that you may have to pay to a customs officer. So we're notifying at checkout. That has summarised the process. Thank you.